virtualization and Kubernetes Slack. Having said that, Daniel, all yours. Thank you.
Thank you too. Yeah, I'm going to talk about Prow. Especially, this is important for KubeVirt because we are using Prow as our CI infrastructure. At first, I'm going over the topics. So we are going to talk about what is Prow, what is a Prow job in general, what job types are there, how do you configure jobs, how do you test jobs, especially not on the server, of course, but locally. And how do you configure jobs for merge gating? And yeah, in the final stage, we will also discuss other usages of jobs. And if there is time, I'll try to do a small demo of testing a Prow job. So let's start. What is Prow? Prow is a CI/CD system based on Kubernetes. It listens to GitHub events and can react to GitHub comments and issues and pull requests. And it can attach status to GitHub commits, which is important for merge gating. It can automate the merges of pull requests. And the most important thing, I think, is that it can run jobs when GitHub events occur. So it is, of course, a front end for the Prow components, for the several Prow components that are there. For example, for Tide or for Prow job overview, which is what I'm going to show you now. This is the Prow status page where you can see the recent Prow jobs, like what status they have, when they were started, how long they ran, how the overall job status is. You can filter by job types, repositories, or by authors. Sorry for that. So what is a Prow job? A Prow job in general is a Kubernetes object that contains a pod spec, certain decorations, and a status. So a Prow job is created either on certain GitHub repository events or on a regular basis. So, and also a Prow job is created from a job definition that is located in a repository in general and then somehow loaded into the Prow configuration. So the job status that is derived from the exit status will then, or can then, get attached to GitHub commit objects in GitHub, which is the basis for merge gating. So what types of jobs do we have? We have a pre-submit job, which runs on each push to an unmerged PR. We have post-submit jobs that run on each new commit. We have periodic jobs that run, like, for example, a cron job or on a time duration base. And we have batch jobs that can test multiple unmerged PRs at the same time. Yeah, user examples of jobs are, for example, for a pre-submit is, in general, of course, the validation of a commit before a merge. So, for example, run unit tests. For a post-submit, it's, for example, something like some update after a merge. So, for example, if you have merged to a branch and you need to update your website on that, so you do it in a post-submit. Then there is a periodic, with which you can, for example, do regular testing or regular creation of resources or whatever needs to be done regularly. And of course, there's the last user example for the batch job is that, for example, Tide uses batch jobs to test multiple PRs at once, which are tested all in one job. I only want to concentrate today on pre-submit jobs because we just want to look at how we can disable merging broken code. So I want to talk about what a Prow definition at first looks like. It's proper YAML, of course, where you can see at the top that there is there you can see the group where all pre-submit jobs, for example, are located. And the second is an org repo string, so that Prow knows for what repo this job needs to get executed. Then you have the list of the Prow job definitions. And the interesting thing about this is, of course, that each job definition has a pod spec that defines what the Prow job does. So then you have some options, because you need to, for example, you can tell the job definition that it only runs, for example, on specific branch types. Like, for example, in this example, we have the skip branches. So we are going to skip all release branches and just run, for example, on everything else that doesn't match this pattern. So then with always run versus run if change, you can decide whether it should run on any change in the repository, or if it should run on specific file path changes with which you can do with run if changed, where you can input a regex pattern. So if it matches that expression, then it gets executed. Then the optional flag is required for telling Prow, or telling in general the system that is this job execution or this status, is it required for a merge to be enabled or not? And at last, the skip report tells Prow whether it should propagate the status from the Prow job run to GitHub and attach it as a status to the commit. And of course, just as a side example, in the bottom you can see presets that are a way on Prow jobs just to generalize general configuration, so that you don't have to repeat on every job if you need, for example, if you need credential information or something else, or other settings that are required for this job, so that you can generalize this and externalize this, so that you don't have to repeat it everywhere. Okay, so the interesting thing about the Prow job is, so you see this example of a small Prow job which tests, of course, like you see, it calls a make test target. So what you see in this container spec, there is an image, kubectl bootstrap. This has nothing to do in general with our Kubectl repository where this job in general runs. So the interesting thing about Prow is that by decorating the Prow job, the pre-submit job, it attaches the current state of the repository that is to be tested to the container and makes it available. So I can just call the make test target of the Kubectl repository with that. Yeah, that's what I exactly said now. So I was a little bit too fast, I think. So one thing you have to notice, of course, is that any tool that you need while you are going to test, they need either to be provided with the image from which the container is run, or they need to be in a repository that can get checked out, or they need to get downloaded on the fly. So, for example, what we also have is required credentials. Most of the time, for example, you need a GitHub token or something so that you can fetch, execute actions. And these get mounted in the usual way, like volume mounts and volumes. Of course, you also have to have, you don't have to have some automated hiding like you have it in some other things. For example, this is one caveat, that you need to be aware of -x scripts, which might lead to leakage of tokens. Okay, how can we test the Prow job? The Prow job definition in general is only active when it gets merged to the configuration branch of your Prow configuration. So Prow then loads the configuration from the configuration repository, and then it gets active, which means that as long as the Prow configuration is not in a merged branch, it's not active, so you can't test it. A way to test it is just to run it locally, for example. Or you can also, of course, run it against the cluster if you don't want to run it locally because you can't. But yeah, my point is that I want to test a Prow job before it gets merged, so that I know that it's working. So there are two steps to test a Prow job. The first is to create the Prow job YAML. So from the job definition, and the second is to actually run it. The first one is you use mkpj, which is a tool from Kubernetes test infra to create the Prow job YAML, which is here's an example how to do this for example for an example job for mine. The second step is actually run the Prow job. Like I said, in the A example, it is just a kubectl create -f from the Prow job YAML, and then it gets executed on the cluster, or you use Fino. Fino is also a tool from test infra, and this enables you to run Prow jobs locally. So they attach everything to a Docker Docker container, and this Docker container then runs locally on your machine. Okay, so then I'm going to show you a demo. I hope everyone can see. Or let me see, stop sharing. So then I need to start sharing again. And a window, I want to share this one. So, okay, on the left, you can see the definition of a Prow job I'm going to run. This is a very relatively simple Prow job that, as an example, tests in this context. I use GitHub, the GitHub CLI, to check whether all members of the KubeVirt organization have two-factor authentication enabled. So this is just an example where in the upper body you can see from line 466 until 478 that I'm downloading the GitHub CLI on the fly because I don't have it available in the KubeVirt CI Bootstrap image which I'm using currently. Then I'm going to log in using this GitHub token that I am going to attach. You see here, and from the lines from 488 to 494, or to 497, sorry. And then I'm going to call GitHub API, for, checking fetching all members who have two-factor authentication disabled, and checking the length. And yeah, I think in general you get the idea. So this is just a simple example on how to create a project. You can of course do everything in this this script what you want. Besides, of course, running any binaries or whatever you have available in the image. So okay, so I'm going to run this. At first, I'm going to create the Prow job YAML. So you see you have a config path where the configuration is. Then you have the job config path where the job configuration is. And by specifying the job name, which needs to be identical, I'm telling the system or the mkpj tool for which Prow job to generate the Prow job YAML. So, and last but not least, I'm just posting it into a temporary file, which is called temp Prow job YAML. So I'm just going to show you the Prow job YAML so that you see that it's just a regular YAML file where you can see, for example, that it's of kind Prow job. And you see the specification that it, for example, holds the complete script, which you can see here. And yeah, you can also see the attachments of the volume mounts. So now I'm going to run the Prow job. So the first thing it is asking me, of course, from where do you want to mount your GitHub path? So as you remember, I guess on the left side, you still can see that the volume mount is pointing to etc GitHub. And of course, when I'm running it locally, I need to provide this. So now I'm going to provide this from my local directory where I have stored my tokens. So the next thing it is doing is it's starting to run. Maybe we can make a little bit more room. I'm going to go a little bit higher so that you can see how the Docker run is set up. Like, for example, the attached volumes, which are mounted, and how the parameters are injected. So it simulates the complete environment that the Prow job would run in. And yeah, this time we can see, of course, this job has failed because of a token scope which is not correct for this application. So I need to take another token, of course, or I need to pick another token that has the access rights. So what I'm now doing is just running it again and applying the correct token with the correct scope. And then you can see that when it runs this time, by the way, it downloads every time, of course, the GitHub binary which I want to have. And yeah, this time you see, for example, that there are no KubeVirt org members with two-factor authentication disabled found. So which is what I was expecting. So this job should be ready to go. Okay. So this was a small demo. So I'm going back to my slides. Sorry for being so slow. Okay, let's continue. This was the demo. So what does this help now? We want, of course, we have seen that we have a failing status of exit 1 and a succeeding status of exit 0. And we have, for example, the automation component in Prow that is called Tide, that looks at all the PRs and have either a status of success or a status of failure, and also looks at the configuration, what labels it needs to have. For example, of course, it always needs to have the labels LGTM and approve, and it doesn't need to have any of the do not merge labels. Now we would consider that the following project configuration would be existing. We have optional false and skip report false, which effectively means that the results of the running Prow jobs were attached to the job itself, or to the GitHub status itself in the GitHub repository PR. And optional false would make this job required. So this, what you see on the bottom left here, is an example from a KubeVirt PR where the top Prow job execution pull KubeVirt has failed, and you see on the right that it is required, and this effectively prohibits the job from at first, for example, from being able to get merged on the one hand, and also from Prow to get picked up and to try to merge it automatically. Of course, even if Tide was not configured, we still could, of course, get it merged also by an administrator, but that's not the topic here. Okay, so the last thing I want to mention is other use cases for Prow jobs, which are, for example, for periodic jobs, you have, for example, reportings that get updated on a regular basis. For example, we have reports for Flake Finder that are run hourly, daily, or weekly. Then we create our nightly builds, for example, with periodic jobs. And of course, for post submits, we also have a couple of examples. For example, we are currently working on creating releases from branches on post submits, and yeah, we are we can build and push images, for example, to a container or image registry in post-submits. And also we can, sorry, build and publish websites in post-submits, like I said at the beginning already, I think. But yeah, okay. So I think that's it from me. So yeah, if you have questions, I'd be happy to answer them. So let me just unshare my screen. Am I still here? So, okay, let's see. Kubernetes, Cloud Stack. Okay.
Hey, folks, if you have questions about Prow, please either post them in the chat. If you want to ask them out loud, then say in the chat you want to ask them out loud, and I will enable your mic.
Yeah, just one thing I forgot. I'm sorry. Thanks for your time, and I hope this was useful for you.
Well, if there are no questions, thanks, Daniel. That was a very interesting presentation. I actually, if I may, may I ask a question? So just to clarify, so the demo that you presented was about not necessarily merging code. It was more about, you know, kind of an administration task of checking the GitHub repos. My question would be, so what else, what's the whole spectrum of things that you can do with Prow? Are you doing everything? Or are there plans to do even more things? Or what's next, let's say, beyond merging code, which would be one or test?
Yeah. Like you said, merging code is still, or gating of merging code is just one aspect on this, right? So we are, of course, always preventing that bad code gets merged, but also we can, of course, have lots of other interesting things, like, for example, whenever you have a commit on this on a certain PR, or not on a PR, on a certain repository branch, you can execute anything you want on that. For example, like shortly we have created a job that that would update a website, for example, after a merge on a branch, and maybe you can a little bit elaborate. I'm not sure if I completely understood the question.
Yeah, I mean, and let me actually also share my camera. Actually, the one point that I actually was the point that I had behind my question was to try to, you know, realize that Prow does much more than at least what one has in mind, you know, when you think testing on merging code. Sure. Another aspect of this might be, maybe I would mention that there are repos in the Kubernetes that are not everything is code. So Prow is also managing now things like the website, for example, or the documentation, and doing things like verifying spell checks for.
Yeah, sure. Of course, you can run anything that has some script and that has some image, where you have the environment where you can want to run your binaries or scripts or whatever you have. Everything can be put into a Prow job and can be executed due by some action, either be it a merge or be it a periodic trigger, like a cron or like an interval. Like you said, for example, we are currently in the process of changing the user guide to MKDocs, and we are currently we are nearly finishing this migration, and after that's finished, we will use mkdocs to create the user guide and just update whenever a merge to master goes in to user guide, the the user guide will automatically get updated. I mean, the GitHub pages will automatically get created and updated and published. So yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks.
Thank you.
Well, as there are no other questions I see here in the chat, a reminder that in Hash Virtualization channel in Slack for the Kubernetes Slack, feel free to reach out to Daniel and ask any questions or any other questions around Kubernetes project. But there is a thread there in that channel for each session and one for Prow. So it's still 2 minutes to the next session. So I think we will take a couple of minutes break. Thank you very much, Daniel, for your great presentation. And
thank you.
We will be back